What's good, folks? It's NightmareFrame here with a new Warframe video coming at you with updated Nekros builds. I'm coming at you with 4 Nekros builds that you can use pretty much wherever you want. Essentially where you can deal a lot of damage and still get bonus loot. Most of the people that have heard of Nekros just know him as a loot frame, and that's pretty much what he is. But at the same time, he's not the best loot frame. Shocking to hear. But first, let me quickly go over his abilities. First, taking a look at Soul Punch. This is something that a lot of people would replace right away. However, it is actually quite useful in certain scenarios. When you hit enemies with this ability, it marks them with this harvest right above their head. And if you kill enemies with this mark on their head, it turns them into your slaves. And if an enemy is down to its last 25% HP, it will immediately one-shot them. So if I mark someone and kill them, it turns into a slave. That's pretty much it. It's like what the 4th ability does, but this ability allows you to target specific enemy units. So if you just want a full army of Xmas units, this is a great tool to do that. Low HP, and instantly get a slave. That's how it works. Everybody is familiar with his second ability, Terrify, because it's his Helminth ability, and people just know it as an armor stripping tool, but it actually has enemies run away from you in fear. It's a fear that armor strips enemies. It has an augment that slows down enemies as it armor strips them. And here we have Desecrate. This is the ability that everyone knows Nekros for. This is what allows you to get bonus loot, as you can see right there, 54% bonus loot. However, this ability is not the greatest looting ability. Let me explain why. When you kill enemies while this ability is active, you have a 2-second delay before you can start desecrating enemies. And then you'll start to desecrate 3 enemies per second after that delay. And when you compare this to Korra's Pilfering Strangle Dome, enemies just have to be captured in the dome, and she can have 2 instances of that dome without any delay. So as long as enemies are in there, you whip, they die, you get loot. But then another thing about this ability, it prioritizes health orbs a lot more. So as soon as you kill, you have to wait for that delay. When you hear that sound effect, that's when you know that Nekros has been desecrating enemies. You see how long that took? Way too long. But it's still a decent brain-dead way to have bonus loot because you're not doing much about it. There's another caveat to this ability. It drains energy per desecration. And that's why people use the Despoil Augment, where instead of using energy, it uses health as a resource. You're not dealing damage to your health. It's like how Hildren uses her shields as a resource. And no, it's not taking damage to health. Now, the 4th ability is Shadows of the Dead. When you kill enemies, you can revive them as your own slaves. Similar to the first ability, but this one picks enemies at random. And it has the augment Shield of Shadows. If you're noticing these lines that are tethered to me, it's what gives me the damage reduction thanks to that augment on the top right there. Each shadow tethered to me will give me a percentage of that damage reduction, and you can have a total of 7 shadows at a time. However, if you kill and summon a Beastmaster, you can have additional shadows, and these shadows' health decay over time thanks to duration, and depending how strong they are and how healthy they are is all down to your strength. Casting the ability initially has one of the worst animations in the world. However, if they're still active and you want to refresh their health, you can cast the ability again with a reduced casting time. And that's the basics of Nekros. Alright, let's start off with the first build, and that is using Gloom as my 4th ability, replacing Shield of Shadows in favor of Gloom, so it gives me a slow aura. And that means I don't have to run the augment Creeping Terrify to slow down enemies. And I'm prioritizing specific enemy units so I can have an army of Xmas units, thanks to Soul Punch. My Archon Shards are 2 casting speed and energy shards. I will be using Matarine Focus School for every single one of the builds to increase my casting speed to 100% because Nekros has very bad slow animations. So thanks to Gloom, I get lifesteal and a slowing aura. And because I'm using Nekros, I get a lot of health and energy orbs thanks to Desecrate. And using Equilibrium with Desecrate, I'm able to replenish health orbs into energy because I'm already getting lifesteal from Gloom. Now, to improve Desecrate, I am using the Ripkas. Why the Ripkas? because it has the mod called Amalgam Ripkas True Steel. It has a nifty thing called Gore Chance. What Gore Chance means is that whatever damage that you deal to enemies, you're able to split them in half, creating an additional body part. And when enemies are bisected, each body part counts as an extra body for Nekros to desecrate. So with Gloom, I'm able to slow down enemies, armor strip them, and kill them. And if I want a specific enemy, I got them. I can select whoever I want to be my ally. There you go. See how the Gore Chance happened? And this is without a slash damaging weapon. Alright, taking a look at the Nekros build. Growing power in the aura, so when I proc a status effect, I get bonus strength. With the modded strength I have right now, thanks to Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify, I get 85% slow and 12% lifesteal. But we can max that out thanks to Materai and growing power. And because I'm using Gloom without Energize, I have also decided to use Prime Flow along with Equilibrium. This way I have a decent amount of energy, so I don't lose too much when I spam my Terrify quite a lot. However, if you do have blue Town Fort shards, you can replace Prime Flow with literally anything. Augur Reach, more armor, more health, it doesn't really matter. Or if you want, you could replace Gloom into the first ability and use the Shield of Shadows augment. So for the people who don't have the best mod in the game, can rely on that. Equilibrium is a must if you're using Despoil, Prime Continuity to give us a nice decent amount of duration, which also reduces the drain and gives us a decent amount of duration on our Shadows and Terrify. Because yes, Terrify's armor strip also scales with duration. For the Phantasma build is pretty straightforward, base damage from Merciless, and that's it. If you're running Arcane Avenger, keep Prime Ravage. If not, put anything else you want. Moving on to the second build, which uses Nourish as the Helminth ability. As you know, Nourish gives you the viral elemental damage multiplier on your weapons, energy multiplier, and viral retaliation. And because you're running Nourish, you can mod your weapons with corrosive or even non-elementals. And that's why I decided to use my Bing Chilling, the Prisma Lens. For my base damage, I just have Heavy Caliber, just to get the arrows to split a bit. Primary Frostbite for some crit damage, and Multi-Shot, which works really well with the Radial Attack because it procs Cold. And since we have Nourish, we get Viral, Cold, and Blast. For this loadout, I'm not using PSF and depending on my Shadows. And the other synergy is that Nourish also applies to allies, and my Shadows count as allies. And because I can armor strip with Terrify, my Shadows will deal bonus damage along with viral damage. Again, 2 Void Slings, activate Nourish, third ability, armor strip. You're gonna stand back just a little bit. And you can also increase the damage of your Shadows with either Roar or Eclipse using the Eclipse augment. Just make sure to refresh your Shadows here and there because the Shadows are our main damage reduction and our status immunity. Okay, you've already seen the Bing Chilling build. Let's go take a look at the Nekros loadout. The aura again is growing power, and this time, instead of PSF, I have Power Drift for just additional strength. And to boost that strength even further, I also have Molt Augmented because this increases my energy multiplier on Nourish. And for those thinking, hey, maybe you can drop out Despoil and just depend on Nourish to give you all that energy. I did try that, and oh my god, even though you have Nourish, it just drains a lot of energy thanks to that negative efficiency. So if you were to not run Despoil, then means you'll have to go with Arcane Energize with Nourish, and you don't want that. So yes, that's why I still kept Despoil. I do have Shield of Shadows for the damage reduction and status immunity. Again, it's a hybrid health shield tanking loadout. With Adaptation, Shield of Shadows, I'm quite tanky for a decent amount of time. Now that you've seen that, let's go check out the third one, which is also pretty interesting. Okay, onto the third build. This was one of my old Endurance Nekros loadouts. I'm using Condemn as my Helminth ability. This locks down enemies and regenerates my shield. So this was free shield refresh. This is a very mobile build, and the reason I need shield refresh is because of my aura. Alright, here I am in Steel Path, and you can see my aura is Empowered Blades. This gives me 60% bonus status chance, which is additive to your status chance mods, and it also grants me 60% bonus damage on the status effects that I'm applying. This bonus damage is separate from faction damage mods, and because I'm using the Zorus, I'm spreading melee influence electric procs everywhere, and that's giving even more damage with Empowered Blades and faction damage. Another thing to note with Empowered Blades is that every heavy attack that you deal will consume 90% of your shields, and that's why I'm synergizing it with Condemn. And Condemn is way faster to deploy than Pillage. However, if you want to use Pillage for the status cleansing, go ahead. But I do have the Worm. Activate my third ability, Armor Strip, heavy attack. Look at that. Replenish my shields, heavy attack. Look at that. You see how fluid and mobile this build is? The downside is when you use a melee with Nekros, you do lose the option of running the Ripkas, so you don't get that bonus Gore chance. Alright, taking a look at the build. In the aura, I have Empowered Blades for that juicy bonus damage and status chance on my heavy attacks. 168 strength is what allows you to get full armor strip on Terrify, so that's why you don't need to mod for that much strength. Arcane Energize because I'm spamming abilities quite a lot and that's going to replenish my energy. And Arcane Fury, since I'm heavy attacking, I get bonus damage on the heavy attack throws. Alright, taking a look at the Zorus build, which I totally didn't record afterwards. Demonstrating two different loadouts. First one is the crit loadout, which is just modded for raw damage and no elemental damage mods, because the explosion and the bounce does proc electric, which can trigger influence fairly easily. While the non-crit build is modded for viral and electric, and it's using volatile quick return, so it can hit multiple targets while it being its own self-primer. Because the crit one will benefit even more from priming, while this one is just an easy just throw your glaive out and have things die. But I'm still modding it with the two wind-up speed mods because it needs that heavy attack wind-up speed reduction. So to demonstrate the first one, using my primer Tractor Cannon, aka Epitaph, just a simple viral and heat build. There is a bug feature, I don't know when DE is going to fix this, but when you're dual wielding and you're tossing your glaive, it doesn't detonate the way it does. You would have to double tap your detonation button just to get the explosion going. That's if you're dual wielding. Make sure you're priming enemies. Everybody's affected by that juicy viral. And boom, they die. Simple as that. For the non-crit variant, all you have to do is toss it and have things bounce back and forth. You see them having viral and electric. We just did 2.1 million damage right there. And it scales even better when you're using Nekros's armor strip. There you go. And let's move on to the final build, which is an ability DPS build. And the final build is using Thermal Sunder for my main DPS, and I'm increasing the damage with the Heat Inherit mechanic. If you don't know what that is, it is essentially boosting the damage over time of my heat damage over time. If you want to know even more details about Heat Inherit, I have a bunch of videos covering this topic. So my Heat Inherit primer is going to be the Dragon's Breath, aka Kuva Ogress. For your Heat Inherit primer, you want to make sure you have a lot of heat damage present on your weapon, and at the same time a faction damage mod, because the heat DOT scales on the first applied heat proc. That scales from the weapon's damage, faction damage, and heat elemental damage percentage. And what allows me to spread this heat DOT within the area is thanks to Nightwatch Napalm. However, there's another mechanic called Blast Inherit, and that's a whole other topic. The main thing you want to do here is apply the heat DOT with your weapon and then Thermal Sunder, because if you're not going to prime enemies, you're going to have to cast Thermal Sunder a lot more than usual. You're in the Steel Path, and this build is very spammy. The energy usage can get pretty high because I'm going back and forth between my Terrify and Thermal Sunder. Desecrate, of course, needs to be active with the Despoil Augment because I don't want any more energy drain than there needs to be. I'll be using Power Transfer, which is a simple transference, and then it gives me bonus casting speed. So prime enemies, you see them right there with the heat. Armor strip, Thermal Sunder, dead. Prime, armor strip, Thermal Sunder, dead. Armor strip, Thermal Sunder. There you go. That's it. This is really it. If I don't use the primer, see, I have to cast Thermal Sunder more than once. And the cool thing is, when you prime enemies and cast Terrify, they won't run away from you, so you don't have to use the augments to slow them down. Okay, so let's go back into the Orbiter to show you how this build is put together. Kuva Ogress, and I have it as bonus Toxin, modded for viral and heat with Nightwatch Napalm. No base damage needed, but you do need to have the heat elemental damage multiplier and the faction damage mod. And for the Sunder Nuke Nekros, in the aura I have Corrosive Projection and just Umbral Intensify. You need to have at least 130 38 if I'm not mistaken, with corrosive projection to get a full strip on Terrify. I have Archon Vitality and Adaptation just to give me some health and some damage reduction, but at the same time, Archon Vitality allows my heat damage to be applied twice. So that's even more damage. And I do have Streamline, Energize, and Steadfast because holy crap, this can get really draining. To make things easier, you have two options. You can use Panzer Vopelphyla for some additional viral procs, or what I would say is use a Nautilus. This loadout, very simple. You got Cordon, Assault Mode, Guardian, just replenish your shields, and this also has Mystic Bond, so you get a free cast. And for the weapon, it's the Hellstrom, modded for viral and radiation. Those who love playing Nekros and want to play him in a different way, in a new light, try these builds out, and you'll notice that you will be dealing a lot of damage and having decent survivability, while at the same time you get some bonus free loot. Not as efficient as Korra, and you won't get those juicy million damage red crit numbers, but you know, you got something. Anyway folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video, and if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, or so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching. As always, peace.